Hello and welcome back to my channel, Read Good, Draw Bad, where we love to read really good and draw pretty darn bad. Today we're going to be doing one of the things I love to do every year, which is talk about indie books. And I love to do this because I love to sort of do a little bit of recognition for books that maybe don't get as much views, or books that I think could be really interesting to read for authors who are independent and people who don't have giant traditional book publishers or a huge marketing budget. And I love reading from independent authors who are doing incredible, amazing things they just haven't been heard about yet. Only rule I apply to Indiemas every year is that the books need to be fairly independent in some way, shape, or form. I have to be able to purchase said book or to download it from a service like Kindle Unlimited or Kobo, etc. I do my best to find books that haven't gotten a lot of reviews but are sort of maybe up and coming and might be a really big deal in a year or two once more people find out about them. And you, if you want to find new cool indie books, I'm going to go through a list that I've sort of curated myself this year in the fantasy, in the thriller mystery category, in the lit RPG category, in the young adult fantasy category, in the romantasy category, which is just romance and fantasy, also for a romance novel that I could feature here today, as well as a few other random books that I'm going to add to this list. So the first book I'm going to be highlighting on this list is a book called Imperfect Magic, and here's the description from Amazon. It is the winner of the Pencraft Literary Award, the Best Indie Book Award, and the Audio Book Reviewer Award, and the American Legacy Book Award. That's a lot of awards, so well done. Imperfect Magic seems to be about someone who's a heretical priest who keeps coming back to life over 800 years or so. And in this particular iteration of coming back to life, there's suddenly evil angels that he has to deal with. And so the concept sounds wild to me, but the reviews are quite good for this book. Something really different, something with a really different concept. It's not usual fantasy tropes, and I'm excited to check it out. I am adding it to my list. Now, the next book I'm going to recommend on this list is a very fun one because it's a dragon story, and everybody loves dragons. This one's called The Sunset Sovereign, a Dragon's Memoir, and it's a retelling by a dragon to an assassin about how they lived their life and what their life was all about. And then the dragon's asking, once my story's done, I actually want you to me. Kind of a fantasy retelling of like a dragon and the life they lived. I think it could be really cool. The next one I think has sort of moved from indie to perhaps traditional publishing, but I'm finally going to get around to reading it this year, and that is The Sword of Kaigen. If you don't know what The Sword of Kaigen is, I didn't really know until maybe about a year ago when TikTok and YouTube started blowing up with book reviews of this book, of being one of the best books that people have read this year, which would have been last year. One of the reviewers describes it as The Poppy War, which is a fairly dark fantasy novel, meets The Last Airbender's Elemental Magic, which is a great TV show if you haven't watched it. There's both a live version and a cartoon version. To me, a dark fantasy with lots of elemental magic and a cool name like Sword of something, usually I'll just pick it up. So this for me is a big recommend, so I'm going to be checking that out this year. If you're looking for something that's more humorous, perhaps more in the line of Terry Pratchett, I would recommend The Drop of a Hat, because this book to me sounds like absolutely hilarious. In this book, Absalom Scrine, one of the main characters, was a magician who's been murdered. However, because of various circumstances, he ends up getting his whole consciousness stored in a magical hat. And who picks up this magical hat? Well, a lowly magical creature, which is a kobold, which I think is like a dog dragon person, depending on who you ask. I think it'll be quite a hilarious case of a mentor who's trying to teach someone who maybe doesn't know what they're doing. Kind of sounds a bit like a buddy comedy, but with fantasy elements, so that's totally up my alley, so I'm really looking forward to reading that. If you want something that is well written by an author who I think is doing quite well right now, I would recommend to you The Murder on Hunter's Eve. Now, this is an interesting book because I actually mentioned this particular author's books in a previous Indiemas video where we talked about The Murder at Spindle Manor. So The Murder at Spindle Manor actually is now a trilogy, and this is the third book in the series, and I think it's getting quite a lot of good reviews. So this one is about a werewolf loose in a city, kind of like London. So it has a little bit of that fantasy monster hunt element as well as like a murder mystery element. So You've just got all these interesting ideas packed into one book, and I'm really excited to read this. Now, I didn't really look deeply into YA fantasy, but I did want to mention a book that I saw was on sale, so I immediately clicked and bought, which is the book Amari and the Despicable Wonders, which is book 3 of the Supernatural Investigations. And so if you've ever read the breakout hit Amari and the Night Brothers, which maybe you didn't because it's young adult fantasy, I highly recommend you read it. It's such a great book, and it's such a neat take on young adult fantasy. Really, really enjoy his books. So yeah, I highly recommend this series. All right, let's talk about a romantasy. Picked out 2 books here that I think sound really interesting to me. You tell me which one you think sounds kind of more fun. The first one is called Songbird of Sorrows, and I'll just read you the description because it sounds really interesting. Epic romantic fantasy series that follows a feisty heroine, her struggles through a dangerous heist and trials, court intrigue and kingdom politics, and a journey of self-discovery, forbidden love, and hidden truths. This book will appeal to fans of character-driven, plot-heavy romantasy such as The Bridge Kingdom, Throne of Glass, Trial of the Sun Queen, and Spark of Everflame. A book where you'll have romance, but there will be high fantasy moments, as well as sort of court intrigue and politics. So sort of at like a nice level where you can just enjoy it and it's really juicy. So that one to me sounds really interesting. I'm looking forward to reading it. The second one I'm interested in is called The Dagger and the Forbidden Heir. This book is a new take on fantasy featuring enemies to lovers, modernized banter, dragons. This is Throne of Glass meets House of Dragon. So I thought this could be kind of a fun take if you're interested in someone looking for a powerful female character with sort of high court politics again, but also there's an enemies to lovers story, which we always love an enemies to lovers story. I did pick out one romance novel while I was perusing sort of on Kindle interesting romance novels, and so I picked this one because I thought the cover was quite fun, and also because this is also an enemies to lovers story, and I don't know what it is with me and enemies to lovers stories, but maybe there's something to that. Clarissa Wilson, who's the main character in this book, was a chubby girl who was teased by Adam James, who's kind of more of like a superstar at the time in their high school years, but she comes back to her hometown with kind of a new identity, a new name, a new look, and basically she decides that she's going to date this guy and kind of leave him in the dust later. So it definitely has a How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days kind of feel, just based on the description. So that to me sounds amazing because I love that movie and I love the concept. So I would love to see how this book turns out, and I think this will be like a really fun romance novel to read. I thought it would also be fun based on what other people were recommending. This is one that really caught my eye called Thrill Switch. This is a woman who became a detective, and as her first murder case comes up, she's horrified because the person is killed in the exact same way her father was killed 7 years ago. And to find out who the current killer is, she must work with the person who killed her father, who's a programmer and a computer whiz, because there's a virtual reality technology element to this whole murder mystery situation. And so I love kind of a fun, enemies have to work together to accomplish a goal that is really important to both of them. And I don't know what it is about enemies and lovers and enemies to allies, or I don't know. Something's going on there, but this seems to be the theme of this book list. One of the recommendations given to me is a really cool fantasy semi-horror novel, which is The Haunting of Bardane Manor. And it's a 2-part double novella. They're really cheap, and so I just thought I'd pick them both up. So there's an unnatural snow that covers the area around this manor, and it's a really spooky ghost who's causing all these problems. So a spirit medium has to go in and somehow fix all these problems and, talk to the ghost, I guess. And so it's kind of like a spooky ghost story, which I really like and fits into the theme of me around Christmas time, around holiday times, reading spooky ghost stories because it's something that a friend recommended to me, and I kind of like the idea of doing that, In the middle of all this wonderful love and happiness, there's a spooky ghost story. Something you might not know about me, but I'm fascinated about birds. One of the books that caught my eye is this book, Amazing Annoying Birds, Living with Australian Brush Turkeys. I know nothing about brush turkeys. I'm not from Australia, but the concept seems so fascinating to me because I can't imagine living with regular turkeys, let alone Australian turkeys. I'm gonna end with a new category that's shown up over the last couple of years called Lit RPG. If you don't know what that is, I think it stands for Literature RPG, where it's a fantasy novel, but they also mention things like statistics for how strong the hero is or something like that. If you've ever played a video game, it's kind of like playing a video game and reading a book at the same time. Regardless of the statistics part of it or not, some of these books are genuinely just really, really good. So I'm gonna give you one recommendation of a book series I'm almost finished that I've loved, and another one that sounds really fun that I think could be up your alley, even if the genre itself maybe doesn't appeal to you. Now, this last book series is a book series I really loved, and I'm almost finished it. I think it is actually maybe the best book series I've read this year, which is about a magical Roomba. If you don't know what a Roomba is, it's basically a little robot that sucks up dust off your floor and then goes back to sleep in its little charger. Cats ride it, dogs ride it. It is generally a piece of machinery that I find hilarious. In this particular book, this Roomba is summoned from another dimension to come help fight a bunch of demons that are invading this fantasy realm, and hijinks ensues. The part I love best about this book series is the humans in this book series are the most unserious characters, and the person with the most sense in this entire book is the Roomba, whose name is Spot. The last one I'm going to mention, because it caught my eye from a list or two that I read, is called The Demon Boba Shop. And boba, if you don't know what that is bubble tea. This is a cozy fantasy novel where Arthur died in this real world, our world, and is summoned to a demon world where he now runs a boba shop, because that is what happens when you get summoned into a cozy fantasy world. So just the concept sounds so interesting to me, and I love books about cooking or even fantasy novels where there's cooking elements or things like that. If you remember the book Legends of Lattes, which came out a year or two ago, I believe, this book was like the definition of cozy fantasy, and I have a feeling that this book is very, very similar to that book. Okay, well, this has been super fun to do. I would love it if you would leave me a comment and tell me what is your favorite indie author book that you've read this year. So if you like this video, please give me a like, hit the like button, and if you want to know the next time I release a new video, you can hit the bell notification. And if you enjoy reading about classics or learning about classical literature, I'm still doing my 20th century book challenge where I'm reading the Modern Library's top 100 novels of the 20th century. Well, that's all for me this week, and I loved looking at all these different authors. Thank you so much to everyone who gave me book recommendations. Much appreciated, especially all the people on Reddit and various forums who gave me great ideas about how to find great indie authors and indie books. Again, I would love to hear what you're reading. Let me know in the comments below. Well, that's all for me today, but I'll see you soon. I hope you're having a wonderful holiday season, and I look forward to next year when I get to review even more indie authors. There's such creativity out there, and I love reading independent work. So as always, stay curious, stay reading.